All right, everybody. Well, thanks for coming out here tonight. Really appreciate it. Tonight, I'm going to read a little bit from this book, I Am Here, You Are Not, I Love You, which just came out a week ago from University of Iowa Press. I'll talk a little bit about that before I dive in. But I first actually wanted to open the reading by reading a poem by Alice Notley, who's been on a lot of our minds for the past week. This is called One of the Longest Times. My brother's always in the gully, too ugly for me down there, but in the vacant lot next to the house, I pile towels on a creosote bush in the corner. We all go in and sit. Does it smell like creosote oil and have flowers like stars? Albert, Margaret, and me holding sacred things here, sticks and rocks, small, black-scored rock is the quantum life story object. Take it, life's beginning and over, compact in your dirty palm. We're huddled in here, don't need anyone, we're star sent out light that's still alive. We're still here, sending out us, as stars from the first world melt. Why aren't we the same as each other? Rocks look the same. I'll never be you. This rocks me from before the flood and after the fire. This rocks you, and what happens to you, it adds up to. This rock this time, and this time in this bush is long, long. Becky's our baby, our sister, and this one is hers from before the flood. And after the fire that comes, I am a rock in these shadows. Who I am speaking to, who am I speaking? I got this me. This one's you. What's the point? It would be better if we all died together. We put and put rocks. I have life coming. Life's nothing but this minute. Something for you, a brown stick for you. This is the longest one of the longest times. It lasts after we're dead and after all people are dead. How do you know? Because thoughts have lasted since the first thought. Because I think that we're in the first thoughts still. Lasting, and we last. And we last. Making real selves. So I know this this project will be new to some of you, and thank you for bearing with me through that. I think I want to provide just a little bit of context. So this is a biography, a sort of a dual biography of two visual artists who also happen to be my uncle and aunt, Andrew Topolsky and Cindy Suffoletto. I became interested in them in large part because I wanted to know why they still meant so much to me and were so present to me after their deaths. But then I was also interested in them because of the place they occupied in the visual art world and in the broader world of the arts. On one level, they came from a time in Buffalo, New York, when Buffalo was producing an enormous amount of culture and everything seemed possible. All of the continental philosophers were living in the same hotel. John Cage and Merce Cunningham and Robert De Niro Sr. and Marcel Duchamp were all there every summer. And Robert Creeley and Charles Olson and everybody was teaching at UB, and anything seemed possible to the young people who came up in that environment. And those young people included Andy and Cindy. But then it all sort of fell apart, and a lot of those young people left. And some of them, like Cindy Sherman and Robert Longo, went on to fame and fortune, and others went on to occupy other sort of strata of the world of art making and art consumption. And Andy and Cindy were among that group. So I became interested in them both because of their experience in this bizarre time in Buffalo that could never happen anywhere else and probably could never happen again, but also because of the types of lives they lived as working artists, which I think are not the kind that we typically, valorize or put into books or films. So I'm just going to read two short passages from this book that I've not yet read out loud before. Also, I should say that the book is certainly a biography, but it's also somewhat memoiristic. I wove my own story through theirs because of that. The initial spark was my relationship with them. So the book starts in Buffalo, but I'm going to pick us up in the Williamsburg of the mid-'80s. This chapter begins with a quote from John Cage, who collaborated with Andy a little bit in Buffalo. A painting is not a record of what was said and what the replies were, but the thick presence all at once of a naked and self-obscuring body of history. And that was John Cage writing on Jasper Johns. For a moment, the breathy rattle of the M train on Broadway is all that she hears. Then, when it's past, the compressed energies of the evening reform around her. The dry, warm lilt of Chris Wallace's voice on 60 Minutes in the next apartment. Running water, high heels clicking clockwise around a table as plates and silverware go down. Peal of beer bottles crated on a handcart moving up the street. Everywhere people are preparing for the end of the decade. Dear Grandpa, she writes beneath the date, December 31st, 1989. You have always been the most amazing person to me. It's hard to find words to describe you. Cindy is freshly back from Buffalo, from a week living with Andy out of a suitcase in the little back room of her parents' house that she'd shared with her sister for nearly 18 years. Now 27, an established expat, coming home for Christmas is like stepping into the past. She is 20 again, 16, 12, passing the same dishes in the same direction to the same waiting hands beside her at the big dinner table, laughing at the same jokes, getting snippy at the same little familial irritations. Even the biggest changes in their lives seem retroactive at Christmas time, written back into the record. Cindy had always lived in New York, it seems now. Her sister, Sandy, had just married that August, and it feels as if Danny, the gentle, wisecracking Irish boy with his enormous glasses and stick-on mustache, had somehow always been a part of their tightly packed Italian family. This year is different. This year the doctors have discovered cancer in her grandpa, John Donnarumma, leukemia. One of the best-known barkeeps in Buffalo since before the Second World War, her grandfather's presence more than filled up any room. It seemed to fill up the city, reach even to her new home in New York. Now that presence is palpably diminishing. John Donnarumma is a great-grandfather now. The infant, Michael, Cindy's brother David's son, sits on his lap like so many infants before him. He calls him Grandpa Gigi, double grandpa. Everyone stops over. Uncle Tony and Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Al and Aunt Mary Jo, the Shearys, the Farbers, Lucy and Larry and Donnie and Lucille, Kathy, Steve Polichetti, innumerable Daniscos. And everyone wants to talk to John. Cindy's grandmother Anita watches quietly from the seat beside her husband, attuned to signs he might be tiring out. His face is drawn, sharp lines running from his cheekbones to the corners of his mouth. His frame is thin, and only a soft gray fuzz covers his crown. But he keeps on smiling. He doesn't want to let his great-grandson go. Now, in Brooklyn, Cindy tilts the little top-bound spiral notebook beneath her fingers and begins again. I blame you for all the good in our family, she writes. You have a way of making people stop their hectic, hard lives to laugh, even strangers, giving everyone a feeling that someone cares. She flips the page, glancing at the clock beside the sink. Peter and Beverly Moscato will be coming soon, more friends from the building. Bob Gully might be stopping by, though you can never be sure with Bob, and maybe Charlotta Kotick and one of her girlfriends visiting from Prague. The food isn't out, the apartment isn't ready. Cindy spots a pair of black socks laid over the lip of the magazine rack next to Andy's favorite chair. But she looks back to the notebook. She wanted to say these things over the holiday, but when? It came and went, imploding into pools of wrapping paper, a sprint through a 4-course dinner, the bare tree waiting at the curb. Back in Brooklyn, she's accepted that she might not have another chance. In her haste, conscious of the cleaning still left to do before their friends arrive, Cindy's pen slips into a slightly stilted interior voice, leaning it on the sort of odd, almost antiquated turns of phrase that spring to the minds of irregular letter writers. For you were a wise man. You had a way of teaching without sounding like a teacher or an old man. So many words, simple sentences that you said to me over the years are still held with me, and I am sad that I could not be closer to you to gain more of that knowledge. Even when you were ill or feeling bad or scared or tired, you would tell a joke. I am so immeasurably proud to have been your granddaughter, and I know that your name will live on forever in our family. You will be very missed someday. But as I do now every day, I will always have you in my heart, and always try to be the remarkable giving person that you were, to always have your passion for living and your strength to stay forever young. A door shuts down the hall, and Cindy lifts her head, concentration breaking. Winter boots on the tile. It will be Andy with a case of Budweiser and a bag of ice. She draws her lips flat, regards the smoothness of her favorite scarlet lipstick, silently runs through everything left to do, flips shut the notebook, stands, and tucks it into the end of a bookshelf on her way to the door. I'm going to skip ahead now, almost 20 years, to a piece of my own story back in Buffalo. And this one also begins with an epigraph. I kind of went crazy with epigraphs in this book. From Molly Brodak's Bandit. In the dark, I grew up. The pizza ovens radiate heat, and invisible particulate grease beats against my back as I stand at the register all afternoon and evening. By the time I clock out at 9 or 9:30, the atmosphere has baked me into a slick and fragrant second skin. I slip like an amphibian into the cool, pooling night. I work at Bob and John's La Hacienda, a pizza shop and restaurant across the street from our house, through my junior and senior years of high school, typically weeknights from 4 to 9 and weekend afternoons. Around the holidays, I also sell watches inside the Macy's at the mall. But Bob and John's is the regular gig. I work mostly because I need to put gas in my parents' cars to visit my girlfriend, who lives half an hour away in Clarence, a suburb like a monkey's fist of cul-de-sacs, a place without sidewalks. I need money for burgers, beer, dates, movies. I don't think about saving for anything further away than Christmas gifts. Like other kids who work the register, I am a transient presence in the kitchen. The cooks and managers tolerate me, so long as I stay well away from the ovens opening and closing, the long wooden paddles like boom gates swinging, the traffic of boxes and plates among the prep station, the warming shelf, the dining room, and my counter. The other employees at Bob and John's, the waitresses, line cooks, oven masters, sub-assemblers, drivers, and dishwashers, are, for the most part, lifers. They've seen changes, seen plenty of kids like me come and go. The way their bodies move in the kitchen gives them away as teammates, like the clips of NBA players with even their tics in mysterious sync. They have long and murky histories with one another. They date and are interrelated, mothers and daughters swapping weight shifts, cousins sharing the cigarettes that always burn like votives in an ashtray by the open back door to the dumpster lot. Most nights they take their pay to the Wellington pub next door, drink Molson's, play quick draw. Typically tight-fisted, on second Fridays they become princely, buying rounds, leaving packs of Marlboros open on the bar. And because of this, they enjoy an easy if sometimes aggrieved sense of intimacy, a private language of gesture and slang, arcane callbacks, expletives, and explosive sighing. I haven't earned the use of this language in large part because I'm not equipped to test it in the narrow arena of the kitchen's common interests. I don't have bills, or kids, or health concerns, and the rest of the workers don't have final exams, or college applications, or girlfriends with hypervigilant mothers. So commiseration, that most powerful binding agent, is not an option. ESPN plays constantly on a small TV near the ceiling, and I like watching sports, but I have no patience for fantasy leagues or commentary. Can't follow their granular assessments of players from other cities' teams. I almost speak up when the whole kitchen argues over the merits of Recovery, the best-selling album of 2010, but my coworkers have Eminem t-shirts, tattoos, and ringtones. As a casual listener, any opinion I can offer is sure to hit a tripwire. So most of the time, I work silently. But one slow summer evening, mid-shift, as the sun pours fiery gold all down Hurdle Avenue, I find myself in a conversation with a few of the other workers in the kitchen. Something unexpected, collegial. Someone asks me to pick up a weekend shift. I can't, I say. I have a gig. Music, says Justin, one of the managers. We call this common ground with good reason. I at once feel more sure-footed in the kitchen. I turn from the register and start to talk with him about my band, a standard basement rock outfit that occasionally plays block parties, parish lawn fetes, fundraisers at community centers. When I mention that I play the drums, Steve, the driver, perks up. This is particularly notable because Steve is an astringent, high-strung person. A little older than most of us, he has kids in junior high, Steve is a senior driver, a semi-official position that involves standing at a map tacked to the wall in the stairway that leads from the kitchen to the basement, assigning delivery orders to different drivers on and off site, and screaming at everyone whose tardiness throws off his careful campaigning, like Nick Nolte in The Thin Red Line. I play too, he says, joining the conversation from his usual post. Immediately, I try to picture him behind a drum set and can only imagine something like the fight scene from Step Brothers. No kidding, I say. How long? Since I was your age, maybe a little younger, he says. But I just sold my kit. Oh yeah? I say. Why'd you sell it? The kitchen falls completely silent. Tiffany, at the substation, tosses her blonde, permed ponytail to look at me. A perpetually stoned driver, whose name I never learned, leans out from the back by the fryers to watch. And Steve doesn't answer. He keeps picking up order tickets and impaling them on a tiny metal spear, eyes forward to the cork board beside the ovens. I know now what I had done. I know I won't say another word this shift, won't be invited to participate in any more casual conversation. Still, Steve will not look at me, though I can see the churning behind his face. Finally, Justin, on the other side of the room, speaks for him. For money, he says. So I'll stop there. Thanks. Next, I'm going to have a little chat with my good friend, Gabe Bump, who is joining us here tonight from the front row. Incognito in the front row. Let me just move this down a little bit. Yeah.
I mumble. Yeah, I'll turn the head back. It was me all along. Well, that was great.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for this book. Okay, so I'm Gabe. I don't know. I know some of you. Most of you I don't know. I graduated from the MFA program. Here I'm coming back to teach in the fall. But most importantly, I lived in Buffalo for three years, I think. 3 wonderful years. And so one reason I really loved this book and kind of jumped at the opportunity to talk to Aiden about it. Well, it's always nice to catch up with people in a formal setting with people around. But okay, so when I think about Buffalo, like I know I have this kind of insane fetishized version of it. Because Buffalo is the only place, and I was thinking about this on the drive up, it's the only place that in my life that I've chosen to live. You know, like I was born in Chicago, like I moved for college, moved back home, got into grad school here, moved out here, lived here for a little bit, then got a job in North Carolina, live there now, and back in New York with my wife and her family. But when I first moved to Buffalo, I could be anywhere in the world. And I remember I was driving back to Chicago from Western Mass, and I hung out at Elmwood Village for an afternoon, went into Talking Leaves, and I was like, I want to live here because I had nothing else to do. And then, like, after staying, like, in a genuine sense, like, that place really saved my life. You know, like, I was wondering, I needed a safe place to kind of land and just kind of lick my wounds and stuff like that. And I thought I'd only live in Buffalo for a year, but there was something about the place and the environment, the artistic community, the food, the bars. Like it felt like a place I could live forever and probably would have lived forever if I didn't get a job like in North Carolina. So I guess like this book to me, it felt not only a really personal and beautiful story about your family, about these two people that you knew and you loved and have had this lasting effect both on you personally but on your art, but what it is, like, underneath all that is a beautiful biography of Buffalo, especially the artistic community in Buffalo. And when I was hearing you just talk about these artists, that I couldn't help but think about our mutual friend Mickey Harmon, who we lost a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Time moves fast. A kind of quintessential Buffalo artist, I think. Someone really involved in community, a really beautiful soul. And so I wonder, maybe if you can just start, because there's so many places. It's a complicated book, and it's complicated in a way that I really like, and I enjoy it a lot. But I think to start the conversation, can you tell us more about the Buffalo artistic community for people that might not be familiar with this weird, beautiful place?
Yeah.
What feels unique about it to you, someone that's experienced other parts of the world, has traveled a little bit, but then also what has kept you there, right? Beyond just family and job and stuff, because you're an artist, you're a very talented artist. And a lot of people leave Buffalo. I think the story kind of ends with people leaving a lot, either for opportunity or whatever. So tell us about the scene. Tell us about why you're still there, grinding away.
Yeah. It's a huge question, and there's a piece of this that I want to throw back at you, actually. But so for a big part of my childhood, my father he worked at UB in administration, and he was the director of the Career Services Center, and that was at a time when Buffalo was basically at its absolute lowest. This was in the late 90s and early 2000s, and somebody who's working in career services at the largest university in Buffalo must have felt that really acutely. And he made his whole personality like trying to get people to stay in Buffalo, for jobs, right? To the point that he did honestly great things in that space, but he also bought a vanity license plate from New York State that was "Stay in Buffalo," but you can only fit so many letters, and they couldn't get the Y, so it was spelled Stan BFLO. So growing up, everybody thought my dad's name was Stan. Stan Buffalo, and he still has that license plate today.
That's really
so this is the kind of sort of inherited attitude toward Buffalo that I grew up with. Where there's this kind of pressure to stay. So when you ask why did I stay, that's a piece of it. I can't lie. You couldn't leave. But I was sort of startled, but also touched that you brought up Mickey here, because I think the first long conversation that you and I had, or not long necessarily, but conversation that wasn't just pleasantries that you and I had, was at Pineapple Company, and maybe Rochelle, keep me honest, but it was either at Pineapple Company or next to it on Allen Street. It was one of those galleries where we were there for a poetry reading in Buffalo. And we started talking about Griselda. And so this is the rappers West Side Gun, Conway the Machine, Benny Butcher. Yeah. And this would have been in 2019. And they had kind of just blown up on the national scene. And you observed, as somebody not from Buffalo, that one of the interesting things about this group is that they were all in their mid to late 40s. And they had just been grinding in Buffalo in obscurity, playing these little bars or rent-a venues, maybe going out to shows elsewhere, but basically under the radar.
Allegedly doing other things.
Yeah. Allegedly doing other things, in and out of jail in some cases. And then all of a sudden the world finally recognizes them at a point when most other people in other creative practices might have given up had they not received that kind of acclaim. And I think that is such a Buffalo thing. It is a place where people just figure out a way to keep going. Partly I think that's because if you're a creative person, the rent is cheaper, the beer is cheaper, although that's getting more expensive. The rent is too. And people just tend to say yes, to things like, oh, you wanna rent out this old factory, to do some freaky like light installation? Sure, go for it. Nobody else is paying me for it, But there's a sort of just like grind it out and just survive against the odds kind of mentality there that I think Griselda is absolutely representative of. And I actually wondered if that's partly why you took to Buffalo. Because in your fiction, you are kind of interested in people who just sort of survive. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, okay, so you're going to do the little switcheroo on that. So I think, okay, so I, even still, I think, well, because maybe it's because I live in Brooklyn now, and like New York is just such an impossible place to be an artist. I mean, it is. Like there's, especially, I don't know, like, non-commercial artists or whatever you want to think about. And in Buffalo, like I moved there with an advance that felt like all the money in the world, and it just wasn't. Like when I got it, sold my books, and so I could afford to not have a steady paycheck for a couple months. And yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I settled in Buffalo and liked Buffalo is because I could sign a year lease and know I could comfortably afford to pay it with the money I had saved, which is like, I don't know. I mean, I knew it was a luxury at the time, but like I was still just kind of like stupid and going through a really just intense personal crisis too. So it was just nothing was real, like money wasn't real. But I was also looking at other places. Like I was thinking about, I have this weird affinity to like Toledo, Ohio. Like I really like Toledo, Ohio. I like all the kind of Rust Belt cities, because it reminds me of kind of where I grew up in Chicago and like the adjacent neighborhoods. But Buffalo, it does have a community, like a vibrancy that other Rust Belt cities don't have, and there was something I couldn't really figure out, and I think that's maybe like this history that you're talking about, and that like and that Cindy and Andy like speak to directly, is it's like you're just hanging out in Buffalo for a while, and like the history just seeps out from everybody. It's like, oh, Ishmael Reed was here and grew up here, wrote his books here. Like you're talking like J.M. Coetzee, like I think, did he start writing Disgrace or something? Because he was at UB for a while. Like, and maybe he was writing Disgrace, like, when he was in Buffalo. Mark Twain lived in Buffalo. S. Scott Fitzgerald lived in Buffalo. And you're just like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, in Buffalo? Like, it's just like this weird double check. And then you just, and this is all, like, secondhand information. It's not stuff that's totally filtered down to someone who grew up in, like, Chicago or something, Like, all of the famous jazz players would like play in Allentown, and like, well, why the fuck is that happening? And it's like, well, because it's the stop between like New York and Toronto. It's this weird like throughway. And then I guess like because we're living in this weird battle against publicly funded arts too. Like, Just Buffalo was one of the reasons I really loved Buffalo. Like this writing center, this like writing community center, was when I was like, oh, I have to get like some kind of job, like I got to teach like classes for Just Buffalo and I still do virtual classes for them. And it's just this community writing center where like these high schoolers just come after class to just like write together. And like, that's just happening like here, like it's happening a stone's throw from Allentown, where I was just like, I don't know, it's like the most debauched place in the world. Like, like there's also these extremes, So I think that's it's. I view it actually as softer than a grind, and I'm kind of giving like a long-winded answer here. Like I actually view it as a really nurturing place, like for these reasons, because it's affordable, because it values artists, because it values community. Ultimately, like I feel it's like a pretty forgiving space too, because everyone's like kind of a mess in some way, I think more people like more than others, but like it's the city of no illusions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's a city of good neighbors. I think there is like this kind of forgiveness intertwined in it. But I don't know, maybe that's too high-minded.
No, I think you're on.
I'm like a real proselytizer about this place. I think it's kind of strange. I don't
No, I think you're onto something. I mean, maybe for the homegrown like Buffalo people, that there's this kind of, maybe because of the dramatic weather of the Great Lakes and the sort of the economic conditions that began in the 50s and are kind of still continuing. There, I think of the sort of surviving grinding thing. But you're right that when I could rattle through like the best known artists and philosophers in any discipline of the 20th century, especially the sort of last 3/4 of the 20th century, and they were all not just like passing through Buffalo, because they all passed through everywhere, but they would stay there for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Like, why was Allen Ginsberg in Buffalo every summer? Why Rochelle and I were listening to Alice Notley interviews and recordings on the way up here, and like, it's like, all right, this one was recorded at Trinity Church in Buffalo. This one was recorded at University of Buffalo. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think that you're right that there is something nurturing about the city, despite its climate and despite the politics and despite the economy. And maybe it's because just enough of those people in those disciplines are there at the same time, or maybe it's because the houses are nice and cozy and warm, even though there's snowbanks up to the windowsills. But there is something there that kept them there for longer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also like proud of its artistic history too. I mean, also like every city's fucked up. Like Buffalo's fucked up too. Like it's one of the most segregated places I've ever been, and like openly segregated.
Well, and how many people in Buffalo today know that Ishmael Reed came from Buffalo? I would say an embarrassingly low number.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, yeah, it's something I can't even imagine, like, because it's just so in my wheelhouse.
Yeah,
like I can't. But I do know that there's a lot of like white kids walking around in Griselda sweatshirts. I remember that being a thing.
That's true.
It was like, there was these like wearing this article of clothing had different connotations, like for whatever race you were. Like and there's like a really stark dividing line, and then even between like ethnicities. Which, again, I'm from Chicago. It's the same, and so I feel like I actually have a weird comfort around evil. But okay. Enough of that. So, can you tell us more about the genesis of this book? So we can talk about Buffalo, but just like a basic question: why did you start writing it? What did you learn as you were writing it? How did it change? Like this idea of like a double biography is really interesting to me, blended in with memoir, because there are chapters that read just like purely like memoir, and I like that balance, and I think you like strike it really well. But how did this come together?
Yeah, so I started this project in July of 2020. Rochelle and I were getting away from Buffalo in the height of that first summer of the pandemic, and there's a good friend of mine who has a magazine who was like really pressing me for new work, and I just had nothing in the tank. I had nothing ready to go, and I was sort of casting about, and my mind sort of latched onto old ideas that I'd been ignoring for a while, and I thought about my aunt and uncle. That February, at a family party, there was an envelope that people were passing around of photographs of Andy and Cindy. So, and I should say too, I left out a lot of biographical details. So Andy passed away in 2008 and Cindy in 2012. Andy, I think, was 56 and Cindy was only 49, which I was so young at the time I didn't realize how young that was. I was 18 when Cindy passed. And I gave her eulogy, which was this very strange experience for me as somebody who, at that point, had like committed to being a writer. I was doing a creative writing degree. I was a freshman in college, and my family asked me to perform this oddly ritualized act of writing, and it was like my first experience of writing anything that mattered to anybody besides myself. And people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, you did such a great job. You really brought her back." And every time I heard that, it like made it feel like a worse job, because I was so aware of how obviously I couldn't capture this incredible person in that kind of form and with the tools I had available at the time. Okay, so 8 years go by. Somebody sends photographs. It turned out that there was a gallerist from Soho who had represented my uncle, who was who had fallen out of touch with them, and he was trying to find Cindy to send her all these photographs of the three of them in Paris in the middle 80s. And he didn't realize Cindy had died. And so he was devastated. He eventually found her brother, and then we see these photographs, and I'm looking at them, and I realized this was a whole chapter of my aunt and uncle's life that I didn't know anything about. I didn't know that they'd ever been to Paris, and I realized I'd always known they were artists as a kid because their art was hanging in our house, but I didn't know what that meant to them. Like what that actually meant they had to give up, what it meant they had access to, how it colored their lives. And so I just started investigating that. And so I thought I would write this little essay for my friend who was bugging me for the essay for his magazine. And within a month, I realized there was just no way the scope of this project could fit in an essay. It was just far too big because I was pulling at all these other threads. Why were all of these incredibly brilliant writers, artists, philosophers, musicians in Buffalo at the same time from roughly 1962 to 1982? Why did they all leave by 1982? What happened? Why? I found a lot of people who said, well, Andy Topolsky was like probably the brightest mind of his generation, in the visual arts. He was the catalyst for that whole movement in Buffalo. Well, that's interesting. Why has nobody written about him? Why is he left out of Hallwalls? Why is he left out of the pictures generation? So I just kept digging and digging and digging, and then, it ended up being roughly 300 pages.
And, okay, there's one... Because, I guess writing... There's a follow-up I want to write, but now I kind of want to take a fork, because you just brought up something that's kind of interesting to me. Is this idea of writing a biography about two people that die tragically young. It does bring up the possibility of alternative realities. Not in kind of a, whatever, metaverse, kind of way, but, I imagine a lot of this book, and especially when we're a young person writing a eulogy for a person that dies young, there's a lot of imagining involved in there, because 18-year-olds are probably emotionally smarter than we give them credit for, but you're not one of their contemporaries, right? There's a lot of kind of imagination at work, and so I guess in the writing, and this is kind of a current interest of mine, is how grief can inspire us to imagine different realities, different futures. And I feel like a theme in this is imagining kind of a different future for both the artistic scene in a place like Buffalo, but then, or not even artistic, a different future in general, a place like Buffalo, but then also a world where they kind of make it, You write really beautifully about particularly Cindy's sickness when she starts getting sick. So how writing about them, getting to know more about them, getting to know more about them in this context, were you imagining different kind of futures? Were you were they kind of present with you? Were there flying cars in Buffalo?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
I really love this question because I think it gets at both something that was in the process of the book, but also something that was in those years between their passing and the writing of the book. And it gets at why I had to weave in the memoir element, because as I grew up, wanting to be a writer, I wasn't working in the same medium as Andy and Cindy, who were visual artists, but I still had to go through some of the same experiences that I knew they went through, trying to get any attention, trying to make something happen, trying to collaborate with people, thinking about whether to move to New York, And in all of those experiences, there was something in the back of my mind that was oh, of all the people in your life that you're close to, Andy and Cindy were the only ones who would be able to relate to this right now, And so they were sort of with me as I went through these experiences. So when it came time to writing the book, I started to document some of that, or at least to suggest some of that, that scene I read where I'm working in the pizza kitchen and learning what money is to other people. In the book, that's juxtaposed with moments where Andy and Cindy in New York sort of realize or run up against just how expensive it is to live in New York even then, and what sacrifices you have to make, the sort of end of innocence, as it relates to the economy of being an artist. And there's another moment in there where I was in Scotland, trying to get somebody to buy my first book. Yeah. And I relate that to this sort of endless anxiety that my Uncle Andy had about getting his next commission, his next sale, that would allow him to make the next work of art, So they were with me, and in a way, I was always imagining an alternative future where they were with me. But then toward the end of the book, I started to imagine an alternative future from this vantage point for both of them. There's one where Cindy's artwork is never discovered, never shown, never written about. And there's one where Andy sort of just fades out of art history. And I thought that maybe by writing this book, I could enact an alternative future where they both get shown, get talked about, and get their sort of place in art history for however long that lasts.
As they should. I mean, like, Cindy's work is really amazing. I mean, it's like really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. And then even like saying about getting these different examples of people kind of grinding and making it, like wanting to be an artist. I think it is nice to see how like unglamorous this stuff is. I mean, like literally smoking yourself to death,
Yeah.
There's a scene where you have Andy's routine, just waking up in the morning, getting his case of beer, going back to the fridge. Those like really quiet, and I think like a lot of people in this room, I think, can maybe relate to in some way. It's just this idea of what do you do with the moments where you're not focused on making your art? And I feel like it can kill a lot of people, how you kind of fill that space. And so I actually liked how you spent time talking about, like how you're like talking about now these like imagined futures. Okay, so using them, learning from them, using their examples, do you feel less anxious about making your art now?
I don't think so necessarily. I think it's part of the art making. And I'm hearing some giggles. Perhaps everybody can relate. I think, you always kind of think, is it going to come? Is the next sentence going to be any good? Is anybody going to care about it? And that's one of the ways that I relate to Andy so much. But one of the ways maybe that the anxiety has lessened, or maybe I just have a different perspective on it, is in Cindy's example after Andy's death. So I just said that, Cindy, her work is really not collected, not shown. That is because, and this is what is one of the more significant discoveries of the book, she gave up her studio practice because somebody had to have a day job. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the consequences of two artists, living together, especially in that time, especially a man and a woman, especially, a lot of things. She made that decision, I think, with at least some knowledge of what the consequences might be, and went through a 15-year period where she wasn't making any art. And this is somebody who moved to New York at age 22 to become an artist, right? However, she continued weaving creativity into her daily life, thinking about art. She was deeply enmeshed in Andy's art making to the extent that I would say it really wouldn't have been possible without her intellectual and material support. And then at the end of her life, she returned to the studio as if she had never left, in full force, and made, I think, the most powerful, interesting works of her career. Now, those disappeared into a cattle barn in Missouri for 15 years and risked being completely lost to time, but she still made the art and worked for 5 or 6 years making the art. So if she was able to do that, to see all of her prospects as a working artist, an exhibiting artist, basically vanish to the point where, I think it was hard for her to imagine getting back into a gallery in those last years. She still got back into the studio and made that incredible work. That, I think, is something that maybe can help all of us.
And that's an artist, man. Like, that's like a real... Mm-hmm. Like, you can just imagine what's happening in her head, sitting in the job, like waiting. Like, the art's always happening. Mm-hmm. And it's just finding a time to put it, to put it on the material. Put it on the medium. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I don't actually. I'm not keeping track of time up here because I feel like we can keep going. We're good. Okay. There's no. We've hidden all the clocks, so you guys can.
Adam will just flash the lights.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about. So this is a book of nonfiction. So this is 2 biographies, a beautiful book of nonfiction. What I thought was really fascinating about reading this, and then also just conversations we've had, years ago, is that you've been I feel like you would probably, I don't know, maybe at some point identify as like a novelist, you know, someone that like wanted to write fiction. Sections of this book focuses on like literally writing a novel when you're young, like having it, like kind of chasing this dream of publishing it. So tell us a little bit about the connection between this nonfiction work you're doing. Like you said, you're even working on a new book of essays now. So the balance between the nonfiction work that you're doing and keeping the fiction dream alive.
Yeah. So yes, for, you know, when I was doing my undergrad degree in creative writing, I was focusing on fiction. I thought I was going to be a novelist. I came out of that program with a novel. You know, I document in this book, like, got some early agent bites, and I thought, like, you know, I graduated in 3 years too, so I was unbelievably young and naive, and I was like, all right, my life's going to change, you know, here we go. And then that just didn't happen. And I did keep writing fiction, and most of my early, you know, publications were short stories and stuff, but I did continue to have bad luck in the fiction department. I mean,
nobody fucking publishes a book when they're 21.
Well, no, sure.
Wait, did Sabina, I think, did something crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There are
one
few,
person. Yeah, one person.
Bret Easton Ellis, Sabina. But, okay, so it didn't work out for me. But the next novel, so I'm like, all right. I'm like, all right, back to the drawing board. I'm going to keep working at them. I'm older. I'm in my mid-20s now. The next time I pitched agents with a novel was February of 2020.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that didn't work out either. But that was before this book came into my life and just upended everything. Yeah. And at that point, I had sort of a different toolkit. You know, I'd done some journalism. I'd done like profiles of artists. I was a stringer for a like music magazine for a while. So I had this other sort of nonfiction critical apparatus that I was able to bring to the project. But in those moments where there were gaps in the record, there were sources who wouldn't talk to me, there were just big questions basically that the archive couldn't answer, I still had to sort of lean into those moments, and I drew on what I knew, which was fiction. So I was able to not invent scenes, like I knew things that generally happened, but to get to the texture of it, what it felt like to them, which was always, you know, one of the early questions that motivated the book, I had to use those devices. So, and that's why, you know, maybe passages like the pizza kitchen thing, or like the, you know, Cindy's interior monologue as she's writing a letter to her grandfather, that letter existed. I did find that in a box in my own grandma's house, but I obviously wasn't there. No one was. So I had to sort of novelize, if that's a word, that moment.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I guess that's just one of my personal feelings about nonfiction too. It's like a really good biography. It works better than a novel. That's just my personal like preference or something. You know, like I don't think I would necessarily have wanted to read like a fictionalized version of like these two people, because I have a hard time imagining it being more compelling than the real thing. You know, especially when like we know the history is real. You know, like we know you're paying close attention to the history and the facts of the place. Yeah, and I get like, so connect to that like journalism thing. Boston I thought was interesting. We talked about it a little bit before too. What was it like interviewing a lot of like artists in their 60s that like lived hard lives?
Yeah.
And about these people that they knew like decades ago. Like what was that process like?
I mean, it was fascinating because a lot of those artists that I, you know, ended up talking to also didn't have books written about them, but also were very talented, interesting artists. And so they ended up wanting to tell me their stories, which is fine. And then the famous artists wouldn't talk to me, you know, like you can't get through to Cindy Sherman. I got through to Robert Longo and he pretended he didn't know anything. Like, whoa, Buffalo, what? I can't talk about that. You kidding me, man? But that's the thing. They've already had their books written. They've been able to tell their story on their terms. I was really interested in these people who operated a different tier of the art world. And so I tried to do justice to some of them. Like, this isn't a book about a generation. It's a book about two people. But like there's a story in this book, one chapter, that may stand out because it has absolutely nothing to do with Andy and Cindy. But I just felt I had to tell this story for somebody who's probably never going to have a book written about him, but he was an artist named Bob Gully. He was a sort of shell-shocked Vietnam veteran who hung around Andy and Cindy's house. He showed a little bit, but he mostly worked construction for like 50 years. And now he's in his 80s. He's living in the suburbs of Chicago, actually, and he's showing art for the first time in a long time.
We love it.
Which is awesome. It's totally awesome. But he told me this incredible story about living in the same apartment building as Basquiat. And they knew each other a little bit, and they would meet on the elevator and talk and everything. And Bob he's still got his studio, but he's working his construction job in the morning. And Basquiat's like just starting to take off, but this is before he really takes off. And one day, Basquiat shows up on the wrong floor of the elevator, and he gets off in a Bob Gully studio, and they start to talking, and Basquiat offers to buy one of his works, right? And Bob goes, and he was making these sort of sculptures, these like guns that would turn into brooms at the time. Yeah.
Wait.
This is Gully. This is Gully.
No, I'm trying to see how it works.
Yeah.
Like AK-47s?
Yeah, basically AK-47s that would turn into like a dust mop or something. Sort of surrealist sculptures.
Okay.
And now they're both artists, and so, just like we do, we're writers, we just trade books back and forth, all day. That's what visual artists do too. And so Bob is like, oh, well, I know you're a visual artist as well and everything. And, he's like, you don't have to pay me, I could take some of your work or whatever. So this is the moment where this unknown construction worker is about to trade his sculpture for a Basquiat original. But Basquiat hears his stomach grumbling, and he knows just through the grapevine that Bob is behind on rent in the apartment building. And Bob has a little bit of a hesitation in his eye because he thinks, I could give this sculpture to this guy, or I could try to sell it to somebody. And Basquiat like clocks this, and he's like, how much do you think that would go for in a gallery? And he's like, oh, I don't know, like $500. He's like, let me give you $500. Isn't that incredible? I mean, that's tragic. And this guy who was speaking to me, in his late 70s at that point, had total equanimity about this event, the fact that he passed this up. But I also thought it typifies the relationship between these two strata of the art world.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to something beautiful in this book too, like this kind of concept of luck in art making too. You talked about people. It's 80% luck. I forget what the actual number you put into it. Some people might think whatever kind of making it is 100% luck. And I mean, we're all part of an artistic community here, and like we all have friends that have varying level of success that we might aspire to or might not fucking want, just whatever. And so I don't know, I really like this idea of focusing on the contemporaries, maybe just because it's who you could get in contact with, but like the contemporaries that didn't have books written about them. Because there was a moment when they're all, like, we're in an MFA program, right? There's a moment when everyone's in the same fucking class. Everyone's, like, trying to do the same thing. The person that's doing it the best in the room consistently all the time isn't even necessarily the person that makes it. I remember every single writing workshop I've been in, my favorite authors in the class, I don't think any of them have published a book, and it's not because they failed at doing it. I don't know, they just got other shit going on, it's like kind of like I have students now, I teach undergrads, and the smartest, the best writers I have in the classroom, they're smart, so they want to be fucking, I don't know, lawyers or something, I don't know. They're like, yeah, I'm the first kid in my family to go to college, so I kind of have to be a doctor. Sorry, man. I can't go get an MFA. Okay, I get that. But I like that perspective of this book, because it does demonstrate something I think is really true, is that everyone in that community in that point in time is important. There isn't we can look back and form stratas in our head. But I'm sure Basquiat's looking at that dude's art and knows that it's not that much better than mine. Dude, that's this gun turns into a broom. Are you kidding me? That's like I wish I could do that. Yeah. You know, they can actually see that, and just as whatever this luck coming in. Yeah. I actually don't have a question attached to that. I just really like that.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I'm so interested in those moments. I love you connecting it to the MFA. There are these moments where, generations of artists coming up are kind of the playing field maybe level, although it's often not. A lot of people come from money, but it feels level, or they're all living in the same place, they're all doing the same thing, and anything is possible, and then the separation happens. I was in New York last weekend talking with the artist Charlie Clough, who co-founded Hall Walls with Bob Longo, and he's got a piece of art in a museum in all 50 states, but he doesn't have the same, his bank account doesn't look like Robert Longo's, right? And so he has a sort of certain feeling about this. And he was saying that everybody recognized in that moment that Longo and Sherman were going places. But sometimes it's because of the talent. That is not a guarantor of whether somebody is going to, keep doing it, as you said, or become a doctor or a lawyer or just disappear. He focused on Longo's charisma and sort of suave nature and adaptability and everything like that. There are these other characteristics that have to go into making success in economic terms that maybe don't have to do with the making of the art.
Yeah, and I guess it's just like those economic terms are so small, right? It's like nobody's making money doing writing
broom
books.
guns. Yeah.
Well, I actually don't know, man. The broom gun guy, but
talk about alternative futures.
Yeah, I know. A broom gun in every house. Yeah. No, yeah, but like even in this kind of privileged space, right? Like how it comes down to like getting into the room and then leaving it, like comes down to work, right? And I guess like speaking of the hip hop scene in Buffalo, I think it's interesting in this regard because I know one of my friends, Billy Esco. I feel like Billy, he's closer to our age, and he was like just always on the coattails of the Griselda guys. Like he would always be on Instagram, like on West Side Gun's like private jet or something. Like he was really close to Conway, because I guess Conway was the guy that was really kind of in Buffalo a lot. Like Benny and West Side Gun spent a lot more time in LA. He was always hanging out with Conway the Machine, and it was like he was in Jay Skis too, and these guys, they were just like always almost there, like it was always just like, yeah, I'm gonna be on like West Side Gun's like new album, like this is it, this is gonna be the thing that does it. Like I have my album coming out, like I have my clothing line coming out, and I feel like you get a real sense of the people that are true artists by the ones that aren't totally attached to that one thing making them successful. It was like, okay, I was on the album, I didn't make $1 million from being a featured artist on the album, but it was really cool, and I got to go to Paris, and that was cool. But now like I'm back home and I'm working on my art again, like I'm doing one of those guys I think are just still grinding. Like I don't think anyone in this room has heard of these people, right? Like Billy Esco, but like I'm that close, And I think like it's kind of the same thing with someone like Mickey, like who, like I still have this. Mickey made this shirt. I don't know if this reference is probably totally lost on people. Like Cheektowaga, this town called like Cheektowaga outside Buffalo. I remember I was adjuncting at UB for a semester, and I wore Mickey's like Cheektowaga shirt to like teach my class, and like literally these kids like were taking pictures of me, like the kids in the back row, the goof-offs, were like cracking up, taking pictures of me, and they were just like, why the fuck do you have like a shirt that says Cheektowaga on it? And I was just like, I was like, I looked cool, and Mickey was selling it in the store, like whatever. And now like I just pulled it, like I don't know, like I still have that thing, and like I don't think that like I wear it, I've worn it all over the world. This like Cheektowaga shirt, and like it doesn't matter, but like it's this piece of art that I think is really cool, and I feel like that's kind of what we want to do as artists. It's like we want our nephews to write books about us. Whatever else. That's that's like an amazing legacy, I think. Just thinking. Mm-hmm. So I guess we've talked for a while. Does anyone have questions? Like, does anyone out?
Yeah, I had a question. If that's all right.
Yeah. Please.
I'm getting an MFA. I have a question. I'm getting an MFA, and I was sitting here like, how do I make this sound so MFA? What?
Please don't.
I'm just gonna ask it, just because I'm hearing all these things. How the hell do you keep going? You can answer that personally. You can answer that from the artist. But we're talking about gentrification. We're talking about putting your thing in the barn for 15 years before. I can't even imagine 15 years from now who I'll be. How do you keep going? Either yourselves or what does your research say?
Well, you want to go first?
No. And actually,
that's a big question.
Can you answer it through the lens of the novel?
Yeah.
The fiction you're working on, actually.
Oh, yeah. That's a good... Okay. Yeah, so how do you keep going? I don't know. In some ways, I do take some energy and sense of calm and equanimity from the example of Andy and Cindy. Like, I feel I'm better equipped after writing this book to keep going because they did through huge setbacks that are larger than any setbacks I've had. And we all, maybe if we're lucky, we have other people in our lives who can be that example for us, or we need to be that example for ourselves. But I think that gets me to the other point. I don't know, maybe I need to put a little asterisk here. A lot of the artists of Andy and Cindy's generation in Buffalo wouldn't actually call themselves artists. Yeah. I think it's this like blue collar mentality thing where they would let other people say that. They would say, I make art, right? Which is kind of interesting. But for the purposes of this question, I'm just going to say, to the extent that I am an artist, I am interested in who I will be 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 15 years from now in as expressed in what I am making at that point. So because I'm so curious, I'm just going to keep doing it, even if it doesn't get published or whatever. If I ever lose that curiosity, I probably would just stop. Mm-hmm. You got to answer too. Yeah. Come on.
No, I actually like this kind of, what do we call ourselves, Like because outside of this space, like I never call myself a novelist, like I'm a teacher. I don't even call myself a professor.
You're a person who makes novels?
I'm a person who makes novels. Yeah, no, I'm a teacher. I think that like that has actually been because before I got like offered this job in North Carolina, because this was during COVID, actually, like a week before, 2 weeks before, like I had filled out an application and done interviews to just be a substitute teacher in the Buffalo school system. Like that's what I want to do. And like I was going to substitute teach with the hopes of getting just like a permanent like English teacher job anywhere, like in Buffalo. And I feel like that has been a real part of my identity. I guess probably since UMass, but even when I was in college, I do like volunteer teaching. Like I would spend a lot of time in the community, just like teach, like reading with kids that like couldn't read, like just stuff like that. So I don't know, and I guess that like because of that takes, I don't even think subconsciously, like it just takes pressure off of making the art for me. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll never fucking publish another book again. I don't know, man. Like, my publishing house might go bust. My editor might retire. Talk to my agent. We're all feeling this, like, crunch to, like, make shit that people want to buy. It's way more stressful if you're an agent and she has, like, a kid to feed and, like, a mortgage to pay. And she's like, hey, like, I don't, like, this, no one's gonna fucking, like, pay money for this book. It's, like, this weird... experimental thing, because I feel like my work's getting more experimental. I feel like the book I wrote when I was 26 was the book I wrote when I was 26. Like I don't want to write that book again, and I feel like I'm trying new things, and so I'm really at peace with, and I feel like everything good that's come my way already has just been like an amazing blessing. And I think that even starts with like getting into grad school. Like I didn't think I'd get into grad school. I was gonna be like a high school basketball reporter for like blogs, like literally, like before I got into grad school. And then everything since then has just kind of been not even like gravy, but it's just been something, okay, I'll just do this, and I feel like I'm always ready, no matter what happens in my life, to just go back to the classroom, just like be an English teacher somewhere. And so I feel like that work feels really kind of good for me. So creatively, how do I keep going? I'm just addicted to it now, I think. Like I feel really weird if I don't write for more than a couple of days. It used to be I'd feel really weird if I didn't write every morning, but now I have a kid, and like it's just like, that dude's up, I gotta be up. So, like if I'm even up at 6 o'clock, sometimes he wakes up at 6:30. So like wake up early and I'm gonna get my pages in with something. So that's it. And I'm not even someone that's like, like I'm a dad first or a parent first. Like I love my dude. He's hilarious. He's really fun. But I know that, my life and his life, I'm not just like a dad and a husband. Like I have my own life that I try to balance with those things. Like do those things as well as I can. But then what else can I bring to the table? And mostly I just sit on the couch. Like honestly, like it's like a lot of just like sitting on the couch. And what am I? I like this book.
Speaking of sitting on the couch and you describing it as an addiction, I do think there is an interesting difference in creative practices and just keeping going between nonfiction, as I experienced it at least, exactly. And then fiction and poetry, where and this is the only book-length nonfiction project I've undertaken, but I received it as kind of an obsession, and I just sort of had to finish the thing, find out all the things, talk to all the people, whatever. And if I didn't publish it, that would be bad, but at least I would have finished the project. Yeah. Whereas fiction and poetry, I think, and I am, you've mentioned a novel a couple times, I am, the novel that I pitched in 2020, I think that's just cursed, and I'm going to have to leave it behind. But there's a new one that I am, like, I've written like a page or two, and I now think of it the way I think when Rochelle says you've got to watch all of Lost. Oh. Where it's like, this is a massive commitment. I know I'll be interested, but I'm going to be, in your words, like on the couch, you know? Yeah. And so I feel like pure invention projects like fiction and poetry, I feel are more received than sort of unearthed the way this was. Oh, yeah. And I know that like if I've been waiting to get like past all these readings and past some other stuff, and then I will give myself over to that novel the way I would give myself over to binging Lost with my wife.
Yeah, dude, yeah. And I think it's like real, well, you should watch Lost. Lost is great.
Totally.
The final seasons are not that
good. We've been watching Lost.
Yeah. Oh, you see that? Yeah, they're doing it.
Season 4.
I can't give it a
bit. Anybody else got any other shows? Well, The Wire.
Seven.
No, but that's another one where it's like
this. Yeah, you have to see The Wire. You have to see The Wire.
Of course, I'm going to see The Wire. But it's like that's like a novel level commitment that I'm like I need to make sure.
Sopranos, all this stuff.
Yes.
Can we pivot to stuff?
Some playlist, whatever.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. I mean, like, and one of the reasons that I am not like writing nonfiction, because nonfiction was a part of my like real education as a writer. Like I was. It's always weird to talk about what anyone accomplished in high school, but like I won like a lot of awards for like reporting in high school, and went to the University of Missouri Journalism School because I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, like an investigative journalist. And then I took a fiction class and realized I didn't like calling people a second time. It's like, and I remember having this like internship for this small newspaper in Hyde Park, the Hyde Park Herald, and I did some investigative stuff for them. Did some just like whatever kind of like passion projects, like small sports reporting stuff. And this like editor gave me an actual story to write. And I'd done this stuff before, but it was something like I just reached this moment. Maybe it was like his fiction entered my life seriously, where I called this dude once. He didn't pick up. I left a message. He didn't call me back, and I went home. And I never called him again. And it was just I didn't have that in me. And I think that you kind of have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's a skill, like that real kind of thirst for unpacking information, like bothering people. Not giving up, like that drive. It's a lot different in nonfiction than fiction. Like my characters, they can't hide anything from me. They can try, you know, but like I know where they live. Yeah. They know what's in their drawers.
Anything else? Fabulous. Well, I think we could call it a night then. This was a great conversation. Thanks so much, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.